Thank you again for joining us this evening. Looks like we've got a good majority of our attendees logged in. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Jeanette at the county for a brief introduction, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation.
Thank you. The county would like to take this opportunity to welcome our attendees to the St. John's Heritage Parkway Alternative Corridor Evaluation Study virtual public meeting. We've had a lot of interest from the public, and we're glad that you are able to join us this evening for this meeting. I'd also like to give special thanks out to the study's working group members, the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization, the City of Palm Bay, Florida Department of Transportation, and also the county's consultant, Inwood Consulting Engineers. And we're ready to begin the presentation.
Welcome to the second public meeting for the St. John's Heritage Parkway Alternative Corridor Evaluation Study. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. Let's go over a few technical topics that will help you have a better meeting experience before we begin the presentation. If you join the meeting using a typical desktop computer and a web browser, you should see a webinar control panel that looks something like this. Your computer speakers are selected by default. Please note that all attendees' microphones are muted upon entering the meeting. If you prefer to listen by phone, please select the phone call option. The dial-in phone number information will be displayed. This control panel is also where you can enter your comments or questions in the question box. Please note that all attendees will be placed in listen-only mode throughout the meeting. You can submit comments or questions by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel anytime during the meeting. Comment forms are available for download on the project website and can be submitted by mail or email following this webinar. Verbal comments can be made over the phone by contacting the consultant project manager, David Dangle, at 407-971-8850. We will not be responding to questions or comments during tonight's meeting. We will be responding to all questions and comments in writing, and will post a summary of the comments and responses to the project website at a later date. If you happen to experience technical issues during the meeting, please type the issue into the questions pane on the control panel to report it. Staff will do their best to assist you. This meeting is being recorded. Let's go ahead and begin the presentation. Welcome to the second public meeting for the St. John's Heritage Parkway Alternative Corridor Evaluation Study. This meeting is being held in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Public participation is solicited without regard to race, color, national origin, age, sex, religion, disability, or family status. Persons wishing to express their concerns about Title VI may do so by contacting the Brevard County Title VI Coordinator, Brian Breslin, by phone at 321-637-5347 or by email at titlevi.ada@brevardfl.gov. Title VI information has been included in the meeting notifications and on the project website. Tonight's agenda includes the introductory remarks just made, followed by this presentation. We encourage you to ask questions and provide comments during tonight's virtual meeting and throughout the life of the study. As mentioned previously, written responses will be provided at a later date, and a summary of the comments and responses will be posted to the project website. Please note that the environmental review, consultation, and other actions required by applicable federal environmental laws for this project are being or have been carried out by FDOT pursuant to 23 United States Code Section 327 and a Memorandum of Understanding dated May 26, 2022, and executed by FHWA and FDOT. Additionally, the study is being conducted in accordance with Title 23 United States Code Section 168, Integration of Planning and Environmental Review. The St. John's Heritage Parkway is a controlled access facility with approximately 10 miles currently open to traffic. The existing southern segment begins at Babcock Street and extends east approximately 1.75 miles to the Interstate 95 and St. John's Heritage Parkway interchange. The existing northern segment begins at Malabar Road and continues north for approximately 7.75 miles until reaching the I-95 and Ellis Road interchange. This project involves the evaluation of new corridors that would complete the approximately 14-mile gap from Babcock Street on the south to Malabar Road on the north. The purpose and need for the project is based on two main items. The first is system linkage, meaning we are evaluating filling the approximately 14-mile gap in the St. John's Heritage Parkway between Babcock Street and Malabar Road. The second item includes economic development. The City of Palm Bay has the project documented in their comprehensive plan and plan for the integration of future land use and transportation. An alternative corridor evaluation, or ACE study, is the first phase in the transportation development process involving new corridors. Through the planning and environmental linkages process, it allows for decisions made during the ACE process to be used to inform the NEPA process. The ACE process follows FDOT's process and establishes the project's purpose and need. It defines the environment of the project area using land suitability and resource mapping. It proposes improvements to address the project need and identifies potential environmental impacts. The study evaluates engineering feasibility and identifies fatal flaws. Public involvement and agency coordination is included in the study. This process is fully documented. The goal is to identify potential corridors to be evaluated in detail at the next phase, being the Project Development and Environment, or PD&E study. The next phases of the project, including PD&E, design, right-of-way, and construction phases, are currently not funded. The ACE process does not include identification of stormwater ponds or floodplain compensation sites, structural analysis, survey, detailed field surveys, such as surveys for protected species, contamination, etc., mitigation measures, air and noise evaluations, cultural resource evaluations, Section 4F evaluations, permitting, adjacent land use issues, such as prescribed fire or roadway alignments. These items would be addressed in future phases, such as the PD&E study or design, if the project is funded and moves forward. The study began in January 2020. Activities completed to date include the future traffic analysis, the development and refinement of corridors, development of the methodology memorandum, and development of the draft ACE report. Meetings have also been held with the Environmental Technical Advisory Team, Working Group, and the public. The draft ACE report is currently under review by FDOT's Office of Environmental Management. The study will conclude this November. Land Suitability Mapping, or LSM, is a mapping methodology that incorporates and evaluates several different geographic information system, or GIS layers, related to cultural, natural, social, and physical environmental resources. This map shows how LSM is used when evaluating areas in which to develop new corridors. It helped to identify areas of avoidance and areas of opportunity where corridors could be developed. Stacking the GIS data creates a shading effect that increases in darkness in areas where multiple resources are present. Several initial corridors were developed using the LSM mapping process. The land suitability mapping process was used to identify several potential corridors. The map to the left shows all the corridors laid out in what we call the spaghetti plot. The map on the right shows the 5 potential alternative corridors resulting from the initial evaluations. To document how the 5 alternative corridors would be evaluated, a methodology memorandum, or MM, was developed to document the various factors that would be considered. This methodology memorandum was reviewed and approved by the FDOT Office of Environmental Management on September 15, 2022. The factors considered include but are not limited to systems connectivity, economic development, transportation demand, right-of-way needs, major utility conflicts, social impacts, including residential displacements and community facilities, cultural impacts, including historic buildings and archaeological sites, natural impacts, including species habitat, wetlands, and conservation lands, physical impacts, including contamination sites and floodplains, and costs, including right-of-way, wetland mitigation, and construction cost. The corridor alternatives developed were evaluated based on avoidance and/or minimization of potential impacts to environmental resources, engineering feasibility, project costs, and agency and public input. These evaluation criteria allowed for the corridors to be compared on an equal basis. Additionally, and for the sole purpose of evaluating the corridors in the ACE process, resources and impacts that were common to each alternative and therefore not contributing to the overall evaluation process were not considered. All impacts and affected resources will be evaluated in the PD&E phase of the project. The rankings assigned range from 1 being the best or having the fewest impacts to 5 or the worst with the most impacts. The lowest overall total score represents the best alternative. Any changes in conditions after the ACE study will be evaluated in the PD&E study phase. Social impacts evaluated include the number of potential residential and non-residential displacements, community facilities and neighborhoods impacted, impacts to special populations, and the amount of acreage impacted to planned developments and prime farmlands. Each criterion for each corridor was rated between 1 and 5. Alternative C had the lowest or best score with an overall score of 5, followed by Alternative A with 11, Alternative D with 13, Alternative B with 16, and Alternative E with the highest or worst score of 18. Cultural impacts evaluated include the number of impacts to historic and archaeological resources, potential 4F resources, and recreational facilities. The criterion for each corridor was again rated between 1 and 5. Alternatives with the same number of impacts for each criterion were rated the same. Alternatives A and B ranked the highest or worst with an overall score of 4, followed by alternatives C, D, and E with overall scores of 3. For an ACE study, species surveys are not conducted, so several assumptions are made related to wildlife impacts. It is assumed that there is a uniform quality for listed species habitat and that there is a presence of the listed species within the suitable habitat. It is also assumed that there is a uniform distribution of listed species within that habitat. Uniform quality for wetlands is also assumed. Impacts to listed species were limited to acres of suitable or potential habitat for the Florida scrub jay and Audubon's crested caracara. These species were selected because suitable habitat, as outlined in the Species Conservation Guidelines for the Florida scrub jay in South Florida, USFWS 2004, and in the Species Conservation Guidelines for the Audubon's crested caracara in South Florida, USFWS 2004, exist within the project study area. Impacts to managed conservation lands, wetlands, floodplains, water features, water quality, and special designations were also evaluated. Alternative C ranked the lowest or best at 13, followed by Alternative B and E at 15, Alternative A at 16, and Alternative D with a score of 18. Impacts to the physical environment include the number of potential contamination sites, noise-sensitive sites, and infrastructure. The criterion for each corridor was rated between 1 and 5. Alternatives with the same number of impacts for each criterion were rated the same. Alternative C ranked the lowest overall with a score of 1, and alternatives A, B, D, and E all ranked a score of 2. Each alternative was evaluated to determine potential impacts to existing infrastructure. Utility conflicts were the same for all alternatives with a score of 1. Alternatives A and B impacted the same number of canal crossings, while the remaining alternatives affected 1 additional crossing. The greatest degree of variation was observed for the right-of-way impacts. Corridor A had the greatest potential impact with 489.2 acres. Corridor E is expected to have the least impact with 447 acres. Based on the final engineering score, alternatives B and E had the lowest score of 4. Alternative C scored 6, while alternatives A and D had the highest at 7. Cost categories assessed were construction, right-of-way, wetland mitigation, and species mitigation costs. Once the dollar amounts were estimated, each category was ranked from 1 to 5. A total evaluation score was then given to each alternative. Corridor C received the lowest score of 9. Corridor A received a 10. Corridors B and E had a total evaluation score of 13. Corridor D had the highest total evaluation score at 15, with the highest construction and mitigation cost estimates. PD&E, design, and construction engineering and inspection costs were not used in the scoring. The corridor impacts of each alternative based on environmental, engineering, and cost criteria are summarized here. Alternative C had the lowest total score of 37 and was therefore ranked number 1. The second ranked is Alternative A with a total score of 51. Alternative E was ranked third, followed by D and finally B. Brevard County has determined that a formal recommendation be made to advance Alternative A and Alternative C to a future PD&E study. These two corridors ranked the lowest out of the 5 evaluated. Alternatives A and C did rank higher than other alternatives for engineering factors. Alternatives A and C have the fewest number of potential residential displacements and have the lowest rankings for social resource impacts. Additionally, alternatives A and C have the lowest estimated cost of the 5 alternatives. The next steps include finalizing the Alternative Corridor Evaluation Report, or ACER, and completing the ACE study. Currently, future phases of project development, including the PD&E study, design, right-of-way, construction, and construction engineering and inspection, are not funded. The PD&E study is estimated to cost between $3 to $5 million. Future coordination regarding funding and project development will be determined at a later date. Thank you for attending tonight's virtual public meeting regarding the St. John's Heritage Parkway Alternative Corridor Evaluation Study. If you would like more information or have any questions about the project, please contact Brevard County's Project Administrator, Jeanette Scott, by phone at 321-617-7202 or by email at jeanette.scott@brevardfl.gov. We will leave the GoToWebinar open for 10 more minutes to allow you time to provide comments or ask questions. Please type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar panel. Additionally, comment forms are available for download on the project website and can be submitted by mail or email following this webinar. Verbal comments can be made over the phone by contacting the Consultant Project Manager, David Dangle, at 407-971-8850. As a reminder, we will provide written responses to all questions and comments at a later date. Thank you again for your participation in the virtual meeting, and we look forward to your comments.
All right, thank you everyone. That concludes our presentation this evening. We ask that you enter any comments or questions that you have into the GoToWebinar question box, and they will all be responded to in writing following tonight's meeting. And I do apologize, we had to cancel, as some of you may know, we had to reschedule this meeting tonight due to the hurricanes that hit last month. So you have until December 18th to provide comments as a part of the project record. All right, and I'll leave this open for just another minute or two. Seems like the questions are slowing down, but we do ask that you type any questions or comments that you may have into the question box. Of course, you can also contact the project manager directly listed on this information listed on the slide, or visit the project website as well. All right, thank you again to our attendees for taking time out of your evening to join us. And with that, my project staff, we do not have any more questions coming in. I'm going to go ahead and close out the meeting. And like I said, we will be responding to all of the questions and comments in writing following tonight's meeting. All right, everyone, have a great night. Thank you.